do, but it doesn't work. Who said what air? Oh, I know, sweetheart.
I didn't put my fan on because I was afraid it was going to make too much background noise.
How does this work? Okay.
Apparently we're live.
Are we?
Yeah.
Are we? Okay.
Good to go.
All right.
Apparently we're live.
Are we?
Probably this is a good moment to say that if you like to mute ourselves when we're not talking so we don't get feedback.
Yes, go ahead and mute yourselves right now.
Probably this is a good moment to say that if you like to mute ourselves when we're not
All right. So then it's going to be difficult for me to keep my Facebook and YouTube page up, Orlando, because I won't be able to hear the rest. I won't be able to keep my sound on.
You have headphones? It might work if you have headphones.
I'm not sure. I will figure it out.
You can also, if you muted the videos on Facebook and YouTube and just kept this audio on, then you just hear us and you wouldn't hear the audio from the other videos.
That's true.
Joy is still logging on. All right, we're going to go in a couple of minutes, but for those of you who are here, thanks for being here. It is such an wonderful opportunity to see so many people who I really enjoy speaking to in one place from all over Ontario. So yes, and this evening is called We Are Not Okay, and it is an opportunity to listen, to learn, and to ask questions. And so before we get started, I'm just going to put it out there that this is a safe place for my friends here. And so we will not be tolerating any kind of messed up comments or rude comments or racist comments or negative comments. It is a place for them to share openly, and they will be honest and they will be vulnerable. And so we ask that you respect that. And you can definitely ask questions. We definitely encourage that, but we're asking that you be kind, because this is a kind group of women that are going to share parts of their life with you. And so we are going to get started. We're just going to each go around and share a little bit about ourselves, who we are. You might not know us. My name is Liz, and I have the opportunity to be your women's ministry director here in Ontario for the Seventh-day Adventist Church. And I have 3 boys and 1 husband, and I really enjoy cooking. And I love when people eat my food too. So that makes me really happy. And one day, I hope that, I can share my love of cooking with you personally. So we're gonna go to Britt. If you could just tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, my name is Brittany. I live in Toronto. What else? I'm a master's student. I'm studying community development at U of T. And I work with an organization called Allyship that provides support people with intellectual disabilities. So yeah, that's a bit of my life.
Awesome. Thank you for being here.
Yeah.
Sueann, can you tell us a little bit about you?
Sure. So my name is Sueann, and I live in Ottawa with my husband and my almost 3-year-old son, Josiah. I'm a stay-at-home mom, and I am a content creator and editor for my blog, Scars and Crowns, and I share about our journey, motherhood, currently sharing a lot of how to raise anti-racist children and about diversity in our community.
Yes. And if you want, afterwards we finish, I will share Sueann's Scars and Crowns blog, just in case you want to join that. It's really got lots of good information on it. Dr. Shereen.
Hi, everybody. I'm Dr. Shereen, I guess, or Shereen. I am a program manager for counseling services for violence against women program and services. And I definitely love riding the motorcycle. That is my joy and stress relief.
Do you take passengers? Do you take passengers?
No, no, it's just for me.
Rochelle, can you share a little bit about yourself, please?
Hi, I'm Rochelle. I am a teacher, specifically music teacher, and I'm also a teacher librarian. I love music, I've been doing it my whole life. I also love to knit. And one of my good friends in Ottawa taught me how to knit, Stephanie Oliver. So
Oh,
there you
that's
go.
right.
Yes, she taught me how to knit, and I've been knitting ever since.
What kind of stuff do you knit? I can knit a scarf and that's it.
There was a point where I was knitting scarves and selling them. I haven't had much time to do that, but yeah.
Oh, cool. All right, thank you. Gracie?
Hi, everyone. My name is Grace. I'm just recently finished school at Queen's University. I studied sciences there. I love working with kids ministries, and I'm passionate about sciences, and I love participating in VBS and Sabbath school and all that fun stuff.
Awesome sauce. And Joy.
Hi, I do want to apologize. Ever since quarantine started with so many people on our Wi-Fi, it's been a little finicky. But thank you so much for having me. My name's Joy Maranga, and I'm currently a full-time student. Much like Grace, I'm very passionate about the sciences. So when I'm not memorizing all these things about the cell, I'm at church, playing some sort of sport, or sneaking in a nap. You know, the usual student activities. And something I'm very passionate about most recently is I've been working with a group that has been teaching science, well, not teaching, more like partnering with teachers to do fun science activities in classrooms, especially in low-income classrooms with you know, kids who are colored and don't normally get those type of opportunities.
That's cool. Is that part of your program?
I actually got introduced to it because one of my teachers was offering it as kind of like a subsidy to one of our labs, and I was like, I will be there. I love working with kids, so it was so easy over spending 3 hours in a lab every week.
Yeah, seriously, true. All right. So, Shereen, do you mind sharing us why we are even doing this?
Okay, so I just wanted to give a caveat. I like Joy, my internet's in and out, so hopefully we'll go through this without any problems. In discussion and after the incident with George Floyd, the Black community.
Yep, it's off.
Black community has been in uproar in regards to anti-racism and the impact that it has had on all of us. And more specifically, as I was kind of talking with other people and interacting with, and just kind of reeling about all of this, it's like, how does this really affect women, Black women? The impact, the offshoot of what this means in regards to the incidents and incidences that have happened over the years. And this conversation is important. It's important because we are part of the Black community. As women, we're it's an extension of who we are, the collective community. And as women, when we play a role in that community, when we see these events happen, these murders happen, it really impacts us as a whole. And for us to connect in that way is important. So it's important for us to have this conversation as women, as part of the Black community. The other conversation is the further impact as women, and it kind of goes down in terms of the levels of systems, ecosystems, but we're talking about mothers, sisters, aunts, daughters, our partners, where we are looking on the screen and seeing them killed, seeing them murdered for things that don't even make any sense. And so the question is, sometimes when that happens, the familial responsibility and the familial weight to carry on with children, with all of these other factors. How do we raise our children? What do we say to them? How do we function, and what is our role as women in this whole community and environment? And if we go back and see the historical aspects of this in slavery, it has always been a breakdown of the family. It has always been separating Black men from Black women, and as it has been in slavery, it still is now. Whether it's incarceration or killing them through the police brutality, or creating we're constantly in bombardment with how the Black family is impacted. And this is important for us as a community to talk about from the women's perspective. And lastly, it's the personal identity. Yes, we see our Black men being killed, but our Black women are being killed as well. And for some reason, and notably so, the attack has been on our Black men, and maybe more proportionately so, but it is us too. And one of the things that has really hit me is when I see a Black woman being killed, I'm like, why am I not valued? What about me is not important? And it's a psychological, vicarious trauma that is being spread in these incidences that really challenges our identity and our personal identity, who we are as individuals. And what does that mean as you see these brilliant minds on here and students, and as we matriculate through school, where do we end up if we walk on the street and we can be just killed because? That really challenges the face and the strength of who we are. And so this conversation, hopefully, we answer questions, really speak about this from a woman's perspective, a young Black woman's perspective. And we won't capture everybody's experience here, but we want to be able to put voice to the Black women and how this is impacting us, how this is tearing us apart in the fabric of who. That's why we're having this conversation, and hopefully we will come to some type of conclusion or movement in some direction.
Thank you so much, Shereen. And for those of you who are just joining now, this is why this conversation needs to happen. And like Shereen said, it's not going to happen in one conversation, but we hope that this starts you having conversations with your circle of friends, with your family members. It doesn't just stop here. This is just a starting point. And it should have started a long time ago. And so this is an opportunity for you ladies to share from your heart. What has your experience been as a Black woman? And so we're going to start. Britt, can we start with you?
Sure. Yeah.
Okay. Go ahead, my friend.
Yeah. So my experience as a Black woman, I feel like when I turned 18 and I moved to Trinidad to start my undergrad program, that's when I really started to be aware of my Blackness in a new way. I feel like it was constantly progressing, because when I was a teenager, I moved to a very white area in Brampton, and I became more aware of my Blackness from moving to a place where there were 2 white kids in a classroom to a place where there's like now only 2 Black kids in a classroom for each class, if they had enough. But when I turned 18 and I moved to Trinidad, I became very aware of my Blackness in a way that was shocking to me. I remember having this experience. It was my first day in undergrad, and I had to meet with the dean of the School of Theology. And I had just I took out my perm and I had a fro. And I walked into his office and we're talking, and he says, "Your hair is moppish and it's not very pastoral." And I think about that very often. He was an Indo-Trinidadian man, married to a Black woman with biracial children. But for me, that moment made me realize how deep-rooted this problem of systemic racism is, and how it just is it's everywhere. And that was a moment. From there, I started to really become aware and try to understand, okay, what is going on here? That even in places where there are barely any white people, and where we are the majority, we're still having these demands pushed onto us, and we're also accepting them. Like, what is happening here? So fast forward, I moved to Alberta, and I was studying at Burman University. And as soon as I got to Burman, it was another like shock. It's like, oh my gosh, I'm Black. And there were a lot of things that were really difficult there. But one of the things that was helpful was that we had a community. While we were like a very small minority in Lacombe, Alberta, we really rallied against each other and protected each other from the blows that were constantly coming. I've had friends that were spat at in restaurants, friends that were called monkeys in Walmart. I constantly saw Confederate flags, and to the point where I'd hold my keys when I walked around town, just in case something was to pop off. These are the kind of things that I was becoming more aware about, and I realized, oh, Canada is not as pretty as it seems. Because I left my comfort zone, but I still had this protection. After I graduated and I started to work, that's when it really, my life started to change, because I no longer was in that protective bubble that I was in before. Even in Trinidad, I had a protective bubble. In Alberta, I had a protective bubble. But when I started to work in predominantly white spaces, where I would literally be the only Black person in the room constantly, and mind you, my work is in Christian spaces, but still I was being targeted in ways that I didn't even know how to respond. And it was really painful psychologically, actually. Sometimes I couldn't make sense of it, but I like to think of it as death by 1,000 knives. And until you become aware, you're just getting slashed and slashed and slashed. So yeah, like as a Black woman, I feel like there's so many systems that are created to make you want to become smaller, constantly. And like when I became aware of what was happening, it was freeing. And it made me, I think what some people might think is more militant, but that's okay. But for sure, it's something that that's why I think this conversation is really important, because there's so many Black women, so many Black people who are struggling psychologically, mentally, spiritually, and they don't know why, because they don't realize how there's so many things at play that are trying to make them smaller. They might not be killed by police, but they're constantly being bombarded by these other forms of enforcement to keep them from actually being their true selves. So yeah, that was my experience, and thank you.
Wow, Britt. I'm sure we could hear more from your heart, but I just want to say thank you for sharing that. Death by 1,000 knives is not something anybody should experience. Joy, do you mind sharing part of your story with us?
Yeah, no problem. So my story started a little bit earlier, and I say this because it really, it made me who I am as a woman. In order for me to see being Black the way that I do. So my parents immigrated from Kenya when we were young, and from a very young age, they would sit me and my sisters down, and they would tell us that you will have to work twice as hard in order to get half of what your white counterparts will get. And maybe I was naive and a little bit, I was young, right? So obviously, well, not obviously, I didn't believe them. And it's kind of like embarrassing to say, but I didn't believe them. You know, mom, dad, don't you know the times have changed? You know, you've already fought this war. I go to school and I play with these kids every day. There's no way that we have different, you know, education or different home lives. But then I'd go to school with braids and people would make fun of them, and then I'd shave my head and then people would make fun of that. Or when I brought traditional dishes, people would make fun of that. So obviously I, like over the years, I started, you know, kind of realizing how I was treated different because of the color of my skin or because of my culture. And then as I started to get older, going towards middle school and high school, that's when I started to notice I guess microaggression from not only students, but teachers. So that also, you know, I built these new walls against teachers where, you know, I'd kind of had to protect myself against them, or I would have to place myself in a position where I know that I have to prove myself more, work harder, or, you know, I have to watch what the others are doing to try and be more like them just so I can be liked. And then I left high school and I thought, you know what, it's done. I am a woman now. I can deal with whatever the world comes at me with. But then you go into the workforce and a coworker says something about your food, or, you know, 3 weeks in, someone refers to a change in hairstyle as magic. And, you know, it kind of gets a little bit much. And it kind of, I guess when I reached this age where I actually started paying attention to what was happening into the news, I realized that we are truly in this position where it just doesn't feel safe, completely safe anywhere we go. It just feels like everything has to be a fight. And then even as I talk about getting a degree in biology, you know, you assume that everyone is starting at the same place, but you go into these classrooms and you realize that people have an upper hand just being a different color. And I'm going to talk about med school because this is something that's close to my heart, and this is something that obviously I'm pursuing as a Black woman, and that's my struggle. You know, they ask about your ethnicity on these applications, and the classroom sizes are or the ratio from Blacks to whites are a lot are very large. You know, I wouldn't be able to say it exactly, but I know that the U Ottawa class had maybe 5 whites in a class of, 5 Blacks in a class of 100 students. So it's just very difficult for me to express that, you know, as a Black woman who's prioritized education, and, you know, prioritize trying to respect everyone. And in these sort of settings, it's very hard to then be told, no, because of the color of your skin, it doesn't matter how hard you work. You know, you're still, or you can work just as hard as someone else. You guys can spend the same amount of hours in the classroom, but when you go into that interview, or when you submit that application and you check that box that you don't have any relatives that are doctors, or that you are a minority, that is significant, and they're going to look at it and they're going to judge you differently. And then I also wanted to talk about the George Floyd incident, because I think that was almost like a breaking point for me, as it was for a lot of people. Maybe it's because we're sitting at home and we're not doing as much or running around, and we're not busy and distracted by so many things that we normally are. But, you know, that night, I really cried, because I was so sad that, you know, human beings are capable of hurting others this way. And then also just realizing that, you know, how many people have experienced this and it's gone unnoticed, right, and completely disregarded. And then you sit there and you say, well, what can I do? And what have I done? And you say, is there anything could I have done to prevent this? Even just in my position, and you kind of feel powerless. you know, and you want to say you feel tired, but truly, like, what have you done for you to feel tired, right? So that's my experience as a Black woman. Obviously I see all these things happening around me, but yet it feels like I've almost done nothing in my power to help change these things. It's kind of heartbreaking, but I'm really looking forward to our conversation tonight and hoping to see what we can take away from it in terms of moving forward together as women.
Thank you so much, Joy. Thank you. I mean, I had no idea that in a classroom of 100, there would be so few people of color. Rochelle, do you mind sharing with us part of your story?
Sure. So there's lots of aspects to my story. Some Brittany mentioned, some Joy also mentioned. I had a lot of anxiety growing up when it came to my hair. And it kind of became more when I started working. Before I cut my hair, I used to have braids or other types of hairstyles or extensions. And every time I changed my hair, my coworkers always had something to say. And it wasn't even just my coworkers, it was even my classmates when I was in university too. Oftentimes, like what Joy was mentioning, when I was in one of my music classes, I was the only Black person. There was no others. It was just me. And I knew before even going to university that was going to be the trend. It was a strange feeling. And oftentimes I ended up feeling like I was a token Black person in every classroom. And oftentimes when I got hired to schools, now that I teach, oftentimes I still feel that way. Around when Black History Month comes around, I get nervous because I feel like I have to be the spokesperson for all of Black kind. And when I know it's coming, I get a lot of anxiety, and I feel like my coworkers are, looking for me to suggest something at staff meeting or something like that. And the pressure becomes really overwhelming. And there's just a lot. There's a lot. Yeah.
Wow. I guess being the only person of color, they expect you to be like the champion of Black History Month. Plan it all, Rochelle.
And also, like, if there's ever, like, if I'm upset about, something that might be happening, I feel like I can't express myself because I don't want to be labeled as the angry Black woman.
Oh.
So there's a lot that I would want to, speak up about.
Right.
That whole notion, oh, I bet she's going to be the angry Black person. It's just,
right.
Sometimes I just feel like
Brittany was saying about making yourself smaller to accommodate what other people are feeling.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing. Gracie, do you want to share part of your story with us?
Yeah, sure. So my family moved to Canada when I was really young, and same as Joy, like for the longest time, I even debated my parents that, racism isn't a thing anymore. Like we're free to go wherever we want. We can do whatever we want. It's not like we're not enslaved anymore. So like, and because no one was calling me like the N-word left, right, and center, like I thought, it's a thing of the past. And it's not till really, I had an experience in the 5th grade where a student repeatedly called me the N-word. And then that's when I sort of becoming a little suspicious of what's going on, I guess. And then fast forward a few years, when I first started at Queens, I kid you not, in a lecture size of probably close to 400, I could see 4 Black people, including myself. Right. And I just saw those 4 people everywhere. Every lecture we had, I could count them. I knew where they sat. I knew where they were. And like overall, my experience at Queens was generally good, but like just being somewhere where there's so few Black people, you feel so isolated. And I knew that going to Queens, but I feel like you never really know the impact of that isolation until you've like been there for a long time. So even then, and even in the program that I'm in, I study sciences, and there's already like very few women in sciences, and there's even fewer Black people in sciences. And then there's
Oh, Grace, your You
Oh.
muted yourself. Okay,
I
go
was
ahead.
gonna say there's even fewer Black women in sciences. So it's just like, it's a very isolating experience. And a lot of the times it led me to like sort of question if I belonged there. So it's like, it's not saying that like I don't, but it's more so saying like I'm doubting my capabilities because like I don't see anyone like me who's accomplished what I want to accomplish. And it's like those things that like really chip away at you. And then it was this, when I was in third year, I had a group project. It's definitely the reason why I now hate group projects, where one of my colleagues or someone in my program inferred that the only reason I got to Queens or was in the program I was in is like to fulfill some sort of diversity quota. And like I just remember going home, like I just like excused myself from that group meeting immediately, and I just went home and cried for like 2 days. I'm pretty sure I missed all my classes the next day. And it's just such an isolating experience. And it's like, who do I talk to about this now? Because like I'm not sure my white friends would understand, and I'm not sure, and like I have so few Black people who are here. So like that was one of the negative experiences I had. And it's just been like a series of things like that where people don't think through what they're saying, and then their words just chip away at you, and they chip away at you until like you're just really sad. And then so it's just been exhausting, and especially like recently regarding everything that's been happening and people, and I'm glad that people do have this desire to get woke, but it's also exhausting feeling like I'm the one who has to explain this to them, you know? And I mean this in the nicest way, but like this information is everywhere. Go read a book or something. Like it's hard for me to always explain it because it's exhausting. But one thing that I remember that I think that has been the most significant for me is that as a child, because in like not just in schools, but I was really never taught how to express the things that have happened to me, not like as like a young child, but yes, that also, but like as like a preteen teen, I didn't know the words to describe the experiences I was having. So it'd be like in my soul, like I know that, like I feel that this is not right the way I'm being treated, but I don't know the words to describe it, right? And so like, and like when like it's February and you're in an English class and your teacher decides to have a talk about Black History Month, like the one time they get to describe it, everyone just turns like this and stares at you for the entire class, and you're like guys, just like read a book or something. I'm not the spokesperson for all Black people everywhere. And you know, those experiences have been really tiring. I think that's the word to describe it. It's really, really tiring.
Yes, because you don't get to just leave your skin and pick it up later when you've got more energy.
Exactly. It's like
your reality. And you mentioned that, you know, there are not a lot of people of color, not a lot of Black people at Queens. Did everyone else expect you to be friends?
Yes.
Like, oh, the 4 Black people. Do you guys know each other? Are you related?
Yes. All right. And we were all in the same residence. So that was even like, which is like even more so, but like I didn't know them for the longest time. But when I did, like it greatly improved my experience, just because it helps to have people who look like you, people who are having the same struggles, so you don't feel like you're so alone all the time.
So you did end up being their friend?
Yes.
Did you have like a secret handshake when you walked down the hallway?
It was more so like we did have Queens does have a few Black clubs on campus. So it was like those places are like safe havens, like oasis.
For real.
You can talk about like the racist experiences you had, and you could talk about how your roommate won't stop commenting on your hair and how she used your shampoo, which is actually really expensive, and things like that. Like there's like when you're friends with someone who's Black, someone who is also in the same program as you, they just understand all these different aspects of the struggles that you're going through, and it's incredibly helpful to have someone who understands. Like, especially in university, especially like in those, I don't know, when it's like stress time and it's exams and life is really difficult, it's really helpful to have someone or like a group of people who understands.
Yes. Thank you, Gracie, for sharing. Doc, do we want to go to you, Shereen? If you can share your story, and then we will
Maybe you can
respond
do
to.
Suzanne and I'll
Say it again. Go to Sueann.
maybe you could, yeah.
Okay, Sueann.
Hey, so I guess like most people here, I realize, or maybe I should say, unlike most people here, I realized that my Blackness was something different pretty early on. I always knew that I was, as far as I can remember, I knew that I was Black. I went to a grade school with mostly Black and brown kids. And then I went to a high school. So I lived in Montreal. So you go to high school in grade 7, which had mostly white children. And it was a bit of a culture shock for me. There were 3 Black kids in my class, including me, and I was the only Black girl. And they made fun of the way I enunciated words with my, West Indian twang, tree, axe, those kind of things. They commented constantly on my hair. Hair seems to be a trend here. How do I get it to stick to my head? Like really annoying questions like that. And it threw me because it confused me how these people grew up in the same city that I did, 10-minute drive from my house. And it was like they had never seen a Black person. I mean, they obviously had, but it was like, and there were a few who probably went to schools with them, but it was just like we were foreign, and it confused me. And then I understood that my reality and the fact that I had been exposed to various cultures was not the same for everybody. And it's something that I brought into my adulthood, and I was aware of. So when I went to university, like, I wasn't so shocked that I was the only one or one of the few Black women in my courses, in my program, that I was going to hear ignorant comments. They still pissed me off. They still annoyed me. But I think having gone through that high school experience, I was a bit more prepared. I understood early on as well that my body, young as I was, that as I matured through high school, my body took a different form. And I experienced what we call like the adultification of young Black women, where you can be a 12, 13-year-old and, you got the butt, or you got, the waist and whatever, and people treat you, I guess, more maturely than you really are. The comments that you get from people, all that stuff. And I feel like I've experienced a lot of that in my teens and into my early 20s. And, in the workplace, like Rochelle mentioned, that fear of speaking up. I am a person who, some of you know me, and I'm a person that doesn't usually have a hard time saying what I need to say. But in a work setting, you have been taught, you have been conditioned to understand that these people, they pay your check. So whether or not you are correct, whether you know what they're saying is wrong about you, it is hard sometimes to take that stand and say, like, I'm not going to tolerate that, because it's going to be like, oh, she's getting angry, or, oh, she's giving attitude, she's being sassy, she's being the stereotypical Black angry woman. And nobody wants that stereotype. But you know what? Sometimes we are angry. Sometimes we're angry, we're frustrated. Sometimes we've had enough, but sometimes we're just being assertive. If this was a man speaking or a white woman, it would be assertiveness. It would be power, it'd be confidence. But with Black women, it's just like, how can we shut them down quickly? It's like, oh, you're getting angry. Oh, nobody needs an attitude from you, that kind of thing. And that has come into play in situations where, like, I've been on trips with colleagues. And I remember there was a woman who was on this trip as well. And my hair was curly and down, and she put her hand into my head. I was like, isn't her hair beautiful? It's all, and I understood that she meant it as a compliment, but I was like, oh my gosh, this is my first, this woman just put her hand into my hair and was talking about how soft it was as she like kind of like massaged it. And everyone's like, yes, it's beautiful. And I'm the only Black person on this bus. And I kind of like eased the weight. I'm like, thank you. But like really inside, you're just frustrated. You want to be like, yo, you're up in my personal space. Don't, like, please, like, you can't, like, you shouldn't do that. And people don't understand why that's inappropriate. Fast forwarding into being married and now being a mom of a Black boy, I think this has been very eye-opening for me. And it has raised my level of frustration, having to be in situations where if my husband's out with friends or he's out especially in the evenings, no matter what it's for, and expecting him to be home like at a certain time and not seeing him at that time, and the amount of fear that I feel, because I grew up, it was, besides my dad, it was, my mom and my sisters. So not having a brother to have that experience with, and not understanding what that intense fear feels like. And now knowing that I'm going to be raising a son and I'm going to feel that every single time that he goes out is terrifying to me. And it is difficult, especially in mom spaces, through pregnancy or when they're young, to have those conversations with people, like in your little mommy and me or baby and me groups. Like nobody really gets that. You're probably one of the few people of color, and then possibly the only Black woman. So who do I have those conversations with about the fact that's like, sometimes I wake up and I look at this child and I love him so much, and the fear that at some point very soon, he's no longer going to be cute to all of you, and he's going to be a target, somebody that you call the police on, somebody that you think is being mischievous when he's just out in the neighborhood, somebody that you're going to follow around the store. You know what I mean? Like, this is the type of environment. And obviously, people like to say things are getting better. I think things are a lot of the same, just different angles. So yes, my child will go to school with these kids, but I know that as soon as something pops off, it will be my child who's going to most likely be blamed. I'm going to have to go to the principal's office and stand up for him. I'm going to have to deal with the racist teachers. And although like a part of me knows this, I don't think you can ever fully be prepared for it. So that is my experience and my current experience, and the things that I think about and deal with when I think of being a Black woman. And I feel like that is the struggle of a lot of Black women. We worry for our family members, our dads, our brothers, our partners, our children. Obviously, we worry about ourselves, but I think that whole stereotype of having to be a strong Black woman means that we need to carry all of these weights of everybody on us and still show up every day and be okay, and still function and still take care of kids and take care of the house and take care of everybody. And still like not always have that support for you, because although we do see Black women, being killed by police, going through that type of mistreatment, we know we experience racism, we know we experience sexism too. I feel like for the most part, people say, well, the likelihood that a Black woman will walk out of an altercation being alive is higher than a Black man. So for that, it's just like, well, we know that we slide back a little bit and we step up to make sure those people are okay, and not always being okay ourselves.
Mm-hmm. Just as long as you're not angry, right?
As long as we're not angry.
Do all those things, but you can't be angry about it.
Never angry.
Right.
Always strong, always, like it's almost like we don't feel like we're not allowed to feel pain. I think that's a stereotype that has extended from slavery. But we are strong and we do not feel pain ever. And even if we do, we cannot show it and we don't slip. And I think that's very traumatizing for our mental health.
Yes. Thank you so much, Sueann, for sharing.
No problem.
Shereen, are you frozen? Maybe a little bit. So while Shereen just gets her tech sorted out, I just want to remind everybody, if you're watching this right now on Facebook or YouTube, can you please share it with your circle of friends? Share it, and also send in your questions on the comment section. Shereen, you can hear us now?
Yes, sorry. Again, the internet is crazy. I've been listening to all these stories, and I feel like sounds like, if I have it correct, some of you have come from different places and landed in Toronto. I've had experiences outside of Toronto, but I grew up in Toronto or Brampton, and I must say, for the most part, for the longest time, it was a bubble. My church experience, Caribbean Black church. I went to school. I had tons of Black friends, and for the most part, didn't really feel that way. There were little incidences, but I was like, yeah, just continue to live life. And it wasn't until later on, partly in high school, I start to realize, and it was more of an internalization, colonization, oppression mentality where, you need to perm your hair. Your hair is too rough. The messages and implicit understanding of what you should look like. And it was never an image of a Black woman, or it was in an effort to be more Eurocentric. And so that was the awakening in regards to, wow, okay, something is not right. Why am I not okay looking the way I look or having the hair that I have? Why do I have to constantly be damaging my hair to fit in on a regular basis? And as you know, I went to school in the States, and it really didn't dawn on me the level of racism until I got to the States, because it's in your face. And so I could adequately compare what it looked like in Canada versus what it looked like in the States, versus this kind of subtle kind of, I'm not sure what that is, racism versus the in your face, we just don't like you type racism. The other piece that was very clear for me growing up in Toronto and having Caribbean parents is that I was Jamaican. I was born in Canada, but I was Jamaican. Like, that was my, that nobody could tell me that I was Canadian until I went to the United States, and I was like, I'm Canadian. Like, it just dawned on me that I was Canadian because I was born in Canada. But it was because when you walked out into your Brampton, Toronto, but where are you really from? So this disconnect, this kind of, you don't really belong here because you come from it. But the interesting thing about Canada is everybody's an immigrant. None of y'all really come from here. Like, I can really say, but where are you really from? Oh, I'm from Italy. Or where are you really from? I'm from China. Like, you could say that to anybody, especially in the Canadian context. But so the disconnect in regards to identity, in regards to where do we really fit in, was a struggle. And, I think now that I'm working in a management position, I sometimes question myself, how did I even get this job? Because at the time I was the only Black person in management. And it's the microaggressions, it's the minimizing of your experience. It's when you really don't have anybody to connect with on that level, because they're going to minimize. Oh, it's not because we hired you. Implicitly, we hired you, so that doesn't exist here. And so you don't really get to say what your experience is. You don't really get to put it on the table, because this pretense of we did our part somehow erodes or negates what you're experiencing or what it really feels like. And what often happens, and what I've been realizing, is that there's internalization. Because we are going to be the angry Black woman, or because we can't speak up or feel we can't speak up, everything gets internalized. And when the experience of George Floyd, I was like, dang, that's what it is. Right? We put it back, we hide it, we press it down. And then every time there's an incident, every time there's something that comes up, it just bubbles on. So, oh yeah, by the way, I don't really fit. My face is not really liked. And if I walk down the street, I'm going to get killed. That's what comes up every single time. And we kind of walk through life saying, okay, it's cool, or it's not that bad. But every single time, you remember, and it's not even that you have to go back to slavery, but it's just the everyday ability of being in your own skin and having to minimize and be cognizant that I don't really belong. I don't really fit in. And you don't wear it as much, it doesn't come out as much, but these instances bring it to the forefront, and you're reminded that that's exactly what is happening right here. This is what I have to deal with on a daily basis. That even though, yeah, you hired me, do I really have a voice? Can I really speak up and say what I want to say? Am I always having to check myself at the door just to make sure that I'm not offending anybody? And not even that I'm being rude, but I'm just saying facts. I'm just putting things out there. You know what I mean? It's not even that I'm trying to do anything. It's just because of the perception, because of the perspective, you're raised to be consciously aware of what it means to wear your skin. And that the words that come out of your mouth are always filtered based on the fact that you have dark skin. The other, I'm lighter skinned than some of my sisters here. And I've always asked, was there favoritism? Did I have to even question some of my success on whether or not, that whole idea of colorism and, the lighter your skin, they kind of like you better. And so it messes with your mind. So not only, as some of my you guys have said, that, my color, or I have to check the box, am I being chosen because I'm filling a quota? Am I being chosen because, I actually have the credentials to be here? Or, am I being chosen on the lighter end because I can pass? And any side of that is messed up. It's just, it messes with your psyche, because then you question, is your abilities and skills and intellect really being measured and really being appreciated based on what you put in? And that messes with your mind. It messes with your mind over and over, as to whether or not, again, do I really fit? And we're not okay. We're not okay. We're trying to figure this thing out, man. And it's hard. It's hard. And, part of it is, I think it's hard to verbalize because we're so silent. It's hard to put into words because we often shove it to the back. So sometimes even when you ask, how can I help, or what can we do, or how do we shift this discourse? I don't know what to tell you. I don't know what to tell you, because I don't know if you can hear the pain that has been muted for so long. I don't even know how to make it real to you. And even if I do share that with you, what does that mean? Because I've just shared it, and then, we're hoping for change, but we've been sitting in the same spot forever, Yeah. And so, sorry, I'm actually feeling it right now, but it's very hard to articulate when you keep it quiet, or you keep it in the back of your head all the time. And you just exist until, you can do something different.
Wow. Thank you, Doc, for sharing. I think what has been shared, and I mean, there are people on YouTube, and there are people who are watching on Facebook right now. And one of the comments that came in was from Janice, and she said, yes, it's hidden.
Yeah.
And I like what you said about it being muted.
Yeah.
It's a lot.
Yeah.
What you have shared. And, there are only 6 women on this conversation right now. Can you imagine all the women who have never said anything ever?
Right.
And have kept it, or like what Grace said, they don't have people to be themselves with.
Right.
What does that do to them psychologically, emotionally? The body expresses itself when we have stress. Physically, it manifests itself. So you can imagine all the health related things that come into play when we keep everything inside. So we're going to move on. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, you just said something. You talk about health disparities.
Oh,
right.
Yes.
And then you have the psychological piece that is weighing in at all times, that is impacting not only the socioeconomic portion of the disparity and health disparities, but just that we carry stress all the time. If you're walking around afraid that your son is going to be shot, you are carrying a little bit more stress than the person beside you. Every single day. Every single day. And we talk about, Brittany was talking about the health disparities with Black women earlier. I don't know if you did that
She
today.
posted it today on IG.
And I've been going through some health struggles and wondering, are you actually listening to me? Are you actually paying attention to what it is that I'm experiencing and giving it the attention due? I was reading one article way back. The man was like, she was in labor and she didn't get the attention she needed and she died.
Mercy.
If it was anybody else, they would have been rushing and doing this and doing that. And he was going to Supreme Court because of it. And I'm like, and if that's my experience, how do I even walk and go to the hospital? Why would I go to the hospital if you weren't going to listen to me?
Yeah.
If you're not going to take me seriously. So we talk about health disparities, but there's so many layers.
Layers and levels of it.
The Black community not engaging in certain institutions because either we're not believed or we're not going to be held, it's messed up.
Yeah.
Money, we don't want to go because you're not going to list us or you're going to treat us horribly.
Yeah. So I'm just going to remind you, if you've got questions or comments, please put them in the comment section. For Grace and Joy, I know that both of you are going to be doctors. Did this disparity play into your decision to become doctors?
I don't know if Grace, you want me to go first? Actually, when I was younger, our family doctor was colored. She wasn't Black, but she was colored. And, that really inspired me to pursue this field. But, once I got older and I started realizing, that there are issues with, not being represented in the medical field and in hospitals. That was definitely a big factor. It's even, that's why I also like going into classrooms, even just as a science student, because it's so important to show these young kids that they have to work hard and, loving STEM is a possibility for them because, it's not just for people who are a certain color and, just to inspire them so that one day, people don't have to experience things like death from child labor, something that has been perfected over time.
That is inspiring. Growing up, if you didn't see somebody like you ever, and then here comes Joy and Grace in your classroom and says, hey, look, I'm going to become a doctor. That's very inspiring. What about you, Grace? How do you feel?
Well, I've actually never had a doctor that wasn't white. And it's not to say that there's anyone, or I don't want to place blame or whatever, but personally, both my parents have had pretty significant health challenges. Both when I was in high school, my dad had a heart attack and my mom was diagnosed with breast cancer. And it's no secret that the healthcare system that we have, it treats Black people differently. And it's not to say that every single physician is ill-meaning or every single physician is racist, but it's more so to say the systems that are put in place aren't put in place to properly treat and address the needs of Black individuals. So while they were going through both their various treatments, I'd go to school, but I wouldn't really be there. The entire time I'd be I wonder what's going on with my mom. I was this great. And even when I went away to university, it'd be Mom, what did your doctor say? Did you ask them this? Did you ask them this? Did you ask them this? If they say this, you need to ask for this test, this test, this test. And if they say no, you need to ask them to document that they said no, so that later on, if this becomes a problem, you have written documentation to say that they denied you care that you needed. And it's very exhausting because it's been like it's hard to advocate for things that you feel like you shouldn't have to advocate for, you know, like I shouldn't have to press you to give me the treatment that I need. I don't know how else to explain it if you don't understand that. So one of my motivating factors with, like, I have many different things that make me want to be a doctor, but one of the most motivating things is I want to see people get the care that they need. And I don't want people to suffer unnecessarily because they were denied that based on the color of their skin.
Yes, you guys are going to be great doctors. Yes, you and Joy. I can't wait.
We'll practice together.
Hey, yes, that would be awesome. So we're going to move our conversation to, like, now what? You guys really shared some honest and some horrific things. So now what? I'm going to just throw some things out there and just, if you feel like you want to answer, please answer. What do you need from your workplace and coworkers? What do you need from them? If you could say to them, I need this from you, what would you say?
I would say they need to make space. I think, and support. I think the hardest thing is like when you go as a Black woman who's already going to come off as angry or catching feelings or whatever. And to have your colleagues approach you afterwards and go, you know, you were really right. But I just, you know, and in the meeting, they said nothing. So if you see something going wrong in a meeting, you need to speak at the meeting, because it takes so much more for us to say something. Like, if I'm speaking up at a meeting, you best believe I've thought about it like 50 times in my head before I've said something. So I'm only saying something because I'm pretty certain that I'm correct. You know, I've had situations where I am the expert of what it is we're discussing, and I'm still being discounted. But then somebody will come after and be like, you were right. I don't care about, I mean, I appreciate you coming to give me a pat on the back afterwards, but that means nothing right now. I've looked like a fool. I've been discounted publicly. You didn't support me when I needed support. Your support really doesn't matter to me right now in this moment. And yeah, allow that space. You know, if I'm speaking up and somebody speaks over me, which is often a thing as well, make sure that that space is returned. Say, you know, going back to what she was saying, or somebody was, you know, they did have a point that they didn't get to finish saying. Can you repeat that? Or that could brought really good perspective. What was that again? Like, allow that space to exist for us to speak up. Ask us if we don't hear us speaking up, make that space. Be like, did you have a question, Sueann? Did you have a comment, Sueann? Was there something that you thought about there? And allow that space for me to comment and to join in that conversation if I'm staying quiet. So I think that's pardon me?
Sorry. Have you ever worked in an environment like that where somebody acknowledged and said that you were actually a part of the team?
It has happened on some circumstances. I feel like I typically got the response that I shared, where people just talk over you or, you know, kind of discount what you're saying or brush it off. So.
Okay.
Yep.
So make space. So for everyone watching, make space. Acknowledge.
I think it's also important to be aware of your privilege, really. Know, just know that this is what it is. Like, it's not in any disrespect to you or any whatever. It's know your privilege. Know that you walk around with a certain amount of privilege that allows you to navigate the world in a different way that I can. And I think, you know, if I went to a conference and the woman speaking was able to social locate and say, I'm a woman, a white woman who has a certain amount of education, and she just kind of located herself in the space. And being able to say that and be aware of what that means allows people to be like, okay, you get it, that you're aware of what it is that you bring just because of your skin color, just because of who you are. And so being able to acknowledge that, because it really does come with a level of, I don't know, for lack of a better word, baggage, or it comes with a filter. And so when you're speaking, if you can acknowledge them, that makes me feel like, okay, whatever you're saying, you've cognizant, you consciously have thought about it and what it means in your own skin, and how that comes out into the world, you know. I think that's just, I think that will be helpful, because in the present moment, that's how we're going to move forward. That's how we're going to be able to kind of make that balance. That if you acknowledge it, then I'm like, okay, you get it. So I can come part to you and we can have a conversation because you're aware of what that means. And so I think that's one thing that would be helpful in any arena, whether work or church or wherever you are. Just know that that's what you're coming with.
I have a question for Brittany and for Rochelle. You know, sometimes when people say that I never asked for this privilege, I never asked to be born white, what would you respond to someone like, because, you know, Shereen just said, just acknowledge it. We're not saying that this is your fault, but when you acknowledge it, it shows that you're aware of what's happening. What would you say to somebody who kind of responds with, well, I never asked to be white, or, you know, I have Black friends, those types of responses? What would you guys say?
For me, the whole I have Black friends things, that that bothers me when people say that. It really bothers me. I don't know if some of you have been watching the news of things that have been happening here in Canada. I know see social media, I won't dive into that here. But just because you have a Black friend doesn't mean you understand.
Say it again.
And that's just what it is. It doesn't mean you understand.
So we can all hear it.
I have a lot of white friends. And when all of this has been happening with George Floyd, a lot of them reached out to me to see if I was okay. Like, they genuinely wanted to know if I was okay. And they said that, you know, they understand their privilege and they want to know what they need to do. Like,
wow.
They were doing things before, but like, what more could they do? And asking for ways. And there's a whole other issue about having to be asking asking those questions, but just the fact that they acknowledged it meant something, at least to me anyways. Because when I was living in Ottawa, as Grace and Joy know, you know, Black people, we stand out like a sore thumb. It's just what it is, you know. But a lot of my friends, they were white, and I didn't have a problem with that. But there was instances when, you know, I would walk into maybe a restaurant with them, and I felt like everybody in the restaurant was staring at us, and like, why is she almost as though they're asking all these questions in their head. Why is she bringing her here? Like, you know, those are some of the things that internally were going through my head.
Yeah.
Not just because I wanted to enjoy this nice restaurant. And I think we need to stop making excuses about some of the things that exist. Like, we're telling the truth. I saw this on Instagram the other day. We are telling the truth. Please believe us.
Yes. Yes. Britt, what do you
Please
think?
believe us.
Yeah, something that came to mind is that, just because I have white friends doesn't mean I absorb their privilege. And the same thing is for white people with Black friends. You don't absorb my struggle because your proximity to me. And I think that that's an assumption that people like to carry, and it's really dangerous. Because when you do that, you're also removing yourself from being a part of the solution, and you add to the problem in many ways. I usually, and especially recently, when I hear those things, I just say, well, you know, our conversation is done, because there's no more place for me and you to go. Like, we have done the journey. There's a lot of work that you need to do. I'm not being paid to do this labor for you. So until you decide to especially if it's just bouncing off a wall, it's not helpful for me and for my health. So yeah, like what do I say when they say that? Like that's it. I think that's pretty much it. I don't absorb anyone's privilege. I don't absorb the luxuries, and I spend lots of time with white people all the time. And I have never felt more privileged or privileged at all. So like, I think that's something to really to consider. I think something also in terms of like this, like what people can do, I think that people are coming, and a lot of people are very aware now, especially with like George Floyd, the death of Regis, and then hearing about what happened to DeAndre, like this Canadian contextual stuff. I've had lots of white friends that are come up to me as well and like saying, hey, like, how are you doing? How can I help? But I've also had a lot of tears and a lot of sorrow. And what happens is it's like this, like they're waiting for me to say, come, it's okay. Like, you know, and I just want to remind, if there's like the Black girls that are watching, all of us here, we don't need to apologize or make space for that type of allyship. I think that type of allyship can be very dangerous and actually makes us do a lot more work. You feel sad, okay. But what you really need to do after you've had your tears, after you've had your, your breakthrough, is to actually do something with your privilege. And privilege is not saying that you have like thousands of dollars in the bank, but your whiteness is not a threat. And that is something that you can use. People will listen to you. So amplify those voices and use that. Don't just feel, I'm so sorry, the world is terrible. Like they've woken up, but it doesn't do anything. It doesn't actually solve any problems. And a lot of times when people have that emotion, they tend to just stay there. And they just say, well, I feel sorry for them. And then that's it. They call it a day and the game is over. But we don't get that off switch. We feel sorry, we feel sad and upset and angry. And most of us, when we have the ability or the strength, we have to push forward and continue on with our lives. Like, don't support the white fragility. It needs to go. I
wanted to add something to what she was saying. Like, even in public, if you're a person that's not of color and you see something that's happening to a person of color, stand up for them. I think it's really important, like just walking in a grocery store, walking in a clothing store, I don't need to be followed. Please stop that, And if you see that, like a security guard or an employee is, following someone inappropriately, like say something, like speak up. If, you're going out to a restaurant and you realize that, we're not being treated properly as we're trying to, order our food, like don't just stand there and say something. I think I don't know if there's like a fear of standing up for us that, they'll be labeled as, I even know what they would be labeled as, but I feel like that is also a big issue. Being afraid to even stand up for us. Why are you afraid to stand up for us? What we've been going through has been happening for so long. Why did it take George Floyd's death for you to realize that what we've been saying for like centuries now, it's still happening? Why did it take so long?
I just want to read a comment. This is a wonderful group of outstanding young women who will undoubtedly be trailblazers. That was from Walda. And another comment is, let us, I think, acknowledge how strong the Black woman truly is. Not because I'm a Black woman, but you have to truly stop to think how strong the Black woman truly needs to be to exist. To exist. And she wrote, "It just hit me now." And that's from Janice. We asked you kind of like what you need from your workplace. I'm going to ask you this question right now. For you, what does it look like to be a non-optical ally? What does that mean to you? Brittany just shared, you don't need us to be shocked about what's happening in the world. We don't need you to comfort us. So what to you is a non-optical ally? How do you know somebody's with you and is going to support you? What does that look like for you guys?
I think in the media and social media, watching all of these videos, what the things that have really struck me is really getting down in the trenches with us. I think there was a video, I think, of a police officer in Michigan who said, you know what, I'm marching with you. And, you know, the community was like, yes, don't, like, just be with us, just walk with us. I think you stand up for us. That's what we need, really. That, you know, when you see injustice, when you see oppression, when you see any abuse, you know, that you stand up and say something, whether it's it's in a system, whether it's on the street, whether it's wherever it exists, that it's so upsetting to you that you have to say something. As you know, before I was saying that, you know, for a long time, our voices have been muted and nobody's been listening to us, you know? And so at this point, we need other people to speak. We need other people to say, this is not okay. So that voice can be amplified. If we keep screaming at the top of our lungs and nobody is listening, or nobody says, hey, somebody's screaming at the top of their lungs and brings attention to it, we're still going to roll around this situation over and over and over again. So I think the what has hit me every single time is those voices, those individuals that didn't just say, oh, it's a bad situation and walked away. They jumped in whatever capacity they can, and meant it, and was like, yeah, I got this, you know what I mean? And I think, you know, this is how we're going to do this together. This is how we're going to walk this thing across. You know, when you think about even the slave, we sometimes talk about Harriet Tubman, we talk about all of those abolitionists and people who got, but there were white people who were along that way, guys. And made it possible. And they joined the situation. They put themselves in danger to stand up for something that they believe was wrong. And so that's, I think, that's the only way we're gonna work through this. That's the only way that we're going to be able to get over this hump. Is if we all get in the trenches, and because it's not, and you know what you see in Canada, the natives, it's not just us.
No.
You know,
so our Indigenous community has been invisible for so long.
Yes, for so long, you know, and it's not, so it's oppression, it's abuse, it's injustice that nobody wants to stand for. And sometimes I hear, oh, we're all humans, but I'm like, we're not all acting like it. And humanity is not equal, apparently. So sometimes I get annoyed by hearing that, because you're not acting like that. You're not helping us be humanity together, because if it did, then you'd be upset, you would be outraged, you'd be, you know, you'd be tearing out your hair because your fellow human is in trouble.
Right.
If that's where we're operating on, that's where we need to be operating from.
So if you are watching and you are wondering, what does a non-optical ally look like? Shereen just described it. So
I want to add something to what Shereen said, if I can.
Go ahead.
I think in addition to listening, a big thing that I talk about is doing your own research and then advocating. And I encourage people to, like, I understand people are like, you know, there's so much and I'm learning so much and I want to do so much. I'm like, you know what? I'm like, I understand it's a lot. It's a lot. Like, you're learning, we're getting used to you guys learning. It's a whole thing. But there are areas in which you work or which you have studied that you already have a certain level of knowledge in, and that you can have the biggest impact in. Research in that area. If you're in the medical field, you should be looking into implicit bias and how that interferes with how you can give care, maternal mental health, like in giving childbirth and stuff. Like, that's where you should look. If you're in education, look at how that plays into how children are being dealt with in schools, how guidance counselors provide them with options for university. Like, that's what you should be looking into. Don't say like, oh, you know what, I'm going to start looking into how it interacts with the musical industry, and how, like, that's not where you need to go right now. Focus in your lane, research in your lane, and advocate in your lane. You already have an impact there. You may be well known in your field, and that's where you can make such a large change because you are respected in your area. You've been educated. You can speak to that in ways that other people cannot. Go in your lane and then expand after. Don't just stay there. Expand after, but start where you are.
That's great advice. Yeah.
Can I just add one more thing? And I think it's a progression. Like, we're talking about voices, and then we're talking about like your field, like the areas you're in. I realize that racism is very money driven, money and power. And in order for us to end or to really dismantle these powers and the system that's holding us in bondage, it really takes finances and money. So a part of me, like, I've been looking at a lot of statements recently from organizations, especially in the nonprofit world where I call my home, and I've been looking at the statements that they're making. We stand with Black Lives Matter, and all these different things that they're saying. And those are nice. But if you realize that your organization is deeply rooted in anti-Black racism and other forms of oppression, then you need to put money and resources in to ensure that you no longer are a part of the problem. So I want to see more people put their money where their mouth is.
Oh, yeah.
And that's a lot more to ask than a nice piece of paper that says we support you. If you really support Black lives, then you're going to put money into the healthcare system, money into the education system. It was Rochelle that talked about being the only Black person in her music class. When I was growing up in Malton, there wasn't even a music program in Mississauga, Ontario, where there were Black and brown kids and barely any white kids. There was no music program. I moved to Brampton, 30 minutes down the road. Everyone in my seventh grade class was playing the piano and reading music. Put your money where your mouth is, because there's too many financial repercussions that happen to racialized youth and racialized people in so many different spheres of life. So words are cute, but if you don't put your money where your mouth is, then the problem just continues to manifest itself. So, yeah.
Pastor Jackie Peart, right before you said put your money where your mouth is, she wrote, put your money where your mouth is.
Auntie Jackie, yes.
Yes. Nyasha wrote that non-optical allies can raise the next generation to be anti-racist, have the conversations that help them to acknowledge their privilege and encourage them to take steps to dismantle the systems of oppression. Absolutely. So this leads us to kind of our, not last question, but our last question. What is the next conversation that needs to take place? Because it can't just stop here. There's power in your story, but how do we dismantle the systems of oppression now? What is our next conversation? What do you think? Who needs to be part of the next conversation?
I think,
go ahead.
Yeah, I think I was just processing, and there's a lot of healing that actually needs to happen in the Black community. There's a lot of work that actually needs to happen in the Black community for us to really connect to the changes and to adhere to the changes. And so while we are asking for those who are non-Black to be our allies, to strengthen us, and we have some work to do as well. We have to be, we're talking about mental oppression. We're talking about generational transmission of emotions and ways of thinking and being that also need to change. And so there's some healing in the community. Even the economic pieces that Brittany was talking about, how we deal with money in our own community. Do we even trust our own community? And so those are pieces that in terms of building, we got to work on. We got to figure out how we're going to get, and me being a therapist, I'm thinking about all of these pieces, but we got to work on those pieces because that's how this is going to work. This is how we're going to be able to walk aside our friends and our allies, and it's going to be lasting change. We got to dig deep. We got to do some of that healing. We got to have some mind change, attitude change, so that we can really move this forward and be honest with ourselves, so that we can do this, because it's time for us to do this. We got to stop hanging out in this space. It's not cool anymore. We got to move. And yeah, so those are some of the conversations in terms of other conversations that need to happen in terms of how we move this forward.
Okay. Sueann, you were going to say something?
I'd like to see the conversation with some white people.
Okay.
To be honest. I feel like Black people have had a lot of conversations. We've been doing a lot of talking. And it's almost like when you're in school and the teacher's lecturing, and then you want to see if the students have learned anything. And it's like, let's put it back to you. What have you learned? What are you doing? I mean, I read something and it was just like how racism is not ours to dismantle. We didn't create it. And so if we didn't create it, then it's not up to us to dismantle it alone. We shouldn't be out here doing all the work alone. We shouldn't be required to teach our children how to walk through, I've had questions, people have DM'd me, and I understand where they're coming from, where they say, I want to help, Sueann. I want to raise my children to be, not racist, and I want to do better. How can I raise my kids? And I'm like, I don't know, because I have a completely different issue. I need to train my child, and I teach my child, unfortunately, how to deal with racist. While you get to have that privilege of a choice of whether or not you get to teach your child about racism. Completely different issue. So I want to hear from, our white friends, our white allies, our white church members of what they're going to do to make it a safe space for us to live in, for us to be in, our safe places for us to work in, safe communities for us to be in. My community has actually created a Facebook group that is for against racial injustice for our community. And it's a beautiful thing to actually see the people who are in this group, and they constantly talk about what they're doing, and they're sharing articles, and they really want, you could see that they really want to learn. And I would love to see more of those conversations in our communities. If you want to be an ally, it's more than your Instagram post, hashtag Black Lives Matters, hashtag Indigenous Lives Matters. We don't care about that anymore. You can hashtag yourself to death. It means nothing if people are still hurting, if systemic racism still exists, if we are still having schools where kids can't have access to the science classes that they need to get into the programs that they need to get into. It's mute till I want to hear back. I want to hear back that all our work was not in vain.
Yes. I just want to say that Kanaya, when Sueann was speaking, she wrote "speak!" exclamation, exclamation, exclamation.
Oh,
Denise said yes. Michelle said true. Janice said that's right. So there's a lot of support for everything that you're sharing. And I think these two things that you just mentioned about what's the next step, what's our next conversation, who needs to be in here. I agree that there needs to be healing because of literally the life of hurt and burden that you've been carrying alone. And one of the things that I think Shereen had said at the beginning is that you've been muted, and that has physical and health repercussions. But conversations with white people, and I'm just going to ask this question: is it only white people that should be a part of the next conversation?
No.
Go ahead.
No. I think that when I especially through just studying, I took a class in Caribbean history when I was in undergrad, and that revolution that changed my concept of how I saw the world and how I saw others and how I saw the system. And I see how our oppressions are linked, and I also see how other racialized people have been used to further oppress Black folk. And it's like, you do this, it's like a ticket, your ticket in. Your ticket in is if you just support this system that threatens Indigenous and Black lives, then now you can have a seat at the table with the rest of the folk, and you get your card. And I think when we come to terms with that reality, like I'm going to be really honest. Like, I've had some conversations with other racialized folk, and they're like, well, our oppression is the same. And it's like, well, no, it's not. No, it's not. I think oppression is so linked, but it's not the same. It's not the same. So it's really important to see how what part of the puzzle do you fit in? And how are you also contributing to the impression of another? And it's so intersectional because every single person has played into someone else's oppression. And when we come to terms with that, I think that's when we can really become anti-racist. So it's for like my Asian folks and for like my Hispanic folks and my South Asian folks. Like we need to all be aware of how this system is oppressing us. Like as a Black person in Canada, I sit in allyship with Indigenous folks and I give them the space to speak, recognizing that I am on their land and that the oppression that they're facing is so institutionalized and so horrific. And I would never say to them that this is, I understand what you're living through. I've never lived on a reserve. I don't know what it feels like to live in a house where all my family is living in a 1-bedroom with no paved roads and poor drinking water. I don't get that. That's not my lived experience. And if I am going to just sit there and say that I also am experiencing the same thing as you, that's a slap in the face. And it does nothing to dismantle their oppression. It actually just puts me in a comfortable position to continue in the partnership of their oppression, because I'm saying I'm no longer a part of the problem, but I am. So it's really important for us to, when we wake up, that we realize the parts that we play. And it goes so deep because, as Shereen was saying, even within our community, in terms of colorism, there are other parts that we can play in linking someone else's oppression economically in so many different ways. But if we don't acknowledge those things, then we will not help. We will not be able to help anyone. And we just continue, the system just continues going in a cycle. So
Thank you for sharing that. I think sometimes people might think, well, I'm not white, so I'm not racist because I'm whatever, I'm brown or I'm Asian or Polynesian, whatever it is. But like you said, we all have a part to play. And even though in our own culture's history, you might have been oppressed or taken advantage of, it is not the same. It is not the same. And I think everyone who's watching out there, we need to understand that it is not the same. Okay. Sorry, go ahead, Doc.
No, I was just thinking about, I think and I had a reaction to the humanity guard, because I think it's like another spin to all lives matter. Like it's like, again, muting the whole issue. And I think when you talk about, Brittany, when you talk about, the fact that people of different color and ethnicities and races have experienced, we have to be cognizant. I can't color you the same way. I can't. And I think we need to approach people understanding their culture, understanding that they come from a history. When I look at you, I can't say that that I erase everything and I don't see what you're experiencing. That is foolishness. And so when I'm talking about being able to connect to humanity, I think I'm really saying that if I am, then I see you. I see you in your race. I see you in your culture, and I respect you just as you are in that, and whatever all of that, whatever that means. And that at the base, you should not experience oppression. You should not experience injustice. You should not experience abuse, like at base. But I don't erase your history. I don't erase your experience. I don't erase what you've been through and lump it into one big category. No, I'm seeing you. And because I'm seeing you in all the rich colors that you come, that you deserve respect, you deserve love, you deserve everything that I have. just because of that. And so there is a play on this whole idea of humanity, and sometimes it triggers me because I'm like, I'm not sure you're seeing it, because I think you're saying it to color everybody the same color, and that's not what we're trying to do. We're trying to experience everybody as they are, and respect them as they are, and love them as they are, and that these systems should be abolished just because they're awesome people, and that's it.
I love what you said. I see you. That's beautiful. When we can be acknowledged. Sorry, Rochelle, were you going to say something?
Yeah, I wanted to piggyback on what Brittany, Dr. Shereen, and Sueann mentioned. I think that this history aspect of all of it is really important. As an educator, when you look into textbooks, a lot of what you learn is European history.
Yes.
Indigenous people aren't even there. And if they are, they're not shown in the right light. A lot of where history starts is when the settlers came, as though there was nothing before that in Canada. And, you know, it's really important that when you get, like when you have this next meeting with a new group, that when they're talking, that they understand what that history is like. For me, I went to a Christian school I went to Crawford Adventist Academy growing up. And so I was surrounded by Black people predominantly, and I learned a lot about Black history. But as this George Floyd thing has started, I've been learning more about our history, like deeper things about our history that I had no idea, because it wasn't in the curriculum.
It was not.
It's not, Indigenous people, like what I was saying about Indigenous wasn't in the curriculum. When I was in Teachers College, I went to U of T for Teachers College, and one of my professors is Indigenous, and he talked about his story, and I cried. His whole lesson, when he was speaking to us, I cried, because it was one thing to know about what Black people had gone through, and then to have never been taught about what Indigenous people went through in Canada. So I think it's really important that, like, you understand our history before you start having a conversation about certain things. And it's like what Brittany was saying about how these things feed off of each other. You know, everyone's oppression, it feeds off of each other. So it's really important, that history aspect.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, sorry, go ahead, Gracie.
I was just to piggyback off of what Rochelle and Dr. Shereen and Brittany and Sueann have all said. I think the education piece is really important to me personally. Everything to this day that I know about Black history or that I know about Indigenous history, I've had to learn on my own. And that's like, I've had to go out and look for it. And like in that process, I've learned that a lot of what is in textbooks is not exactly accurate, or it's shown from a very Eurocentric perspective.
Yeah.
And I think in a future conversation, it would be important to have representation from different groups also, but it would be important that those groups have taken the time to learn and have taken the time to investigate the current systems that we have, as well as the history of different ethnic groups that are present here in Canada. And I think that's because a lot of things, if you look at them at face value, they seem innocent enough. But then if you look at how these institutions were created and why these institutions were created and the unexpected or even expected consequences of them that we have, you realize that a lot of them disproportionately affect minority groups, right? And specifically Black and Indigenous people of color. For example, and this is something I literally learned this week. By the time a child is 4, if they're born into an affluent family, they have 30 million more words than if they were born into poverty, right? That's 30 million. And if you think like that sets you up for so much, right? It sets you up for like you starting school, you have the words to express yourself, so you don't tend to act out more. Right? Because you don't tend to act out more, you're not labeled as that like troubled kid who's like needs to be constantly watched, and teachers have like a better attitude towards you. And it's just this effect that this one tiny thing or seemingly tiny thing that started when you were so young, it's a snowball effect where like now maybe you're in like the 3rd grade and you're still behind these kids. Sorry, I just dropped something. you're behind, and because of that, you've been labeled as someone who's either not intelligent, or you've been labeled as someone who has behavioral challenges. And it's just like this snowball effect, right? Teachers aren't as willing to help you out, things like that. And I think when you look at really, and that's just an example of like the education system, right? When you look at a lot of other systems, there are cycles that happen where it's like, now, because of something that happened a long time ago, you've sort of been set back, and these things pile up and pile up and pile up. And now you're at like a huge disadvantage compared to your peers. But optically speaking, yes, you and I both went through the same 12 years of education, right? Optically speaking. So optically, you and I both should be able to get into the same program, but then, like, you know what I mean? It's these disparities that aren't really addressed and that are hidden. So I think it would be important to talk about those and talk about the cycles that are present and have these discussions on how to dismantle them with everyone present, but with also people who have like done their research and people who have taken the time to educate themselves on these topics.
This has been like amazing conversation. I wish you guys could see all of the yeses and the exactlys and the that's right, and this is how we change comments. But as we come to a close, I have a question for you, and I'd like you to speak to your 5-year-old self, to think back of, you know, little you, 5 years old. What would you say to your 5-year-old self to prepare yourself to go through life? I know everyone's looking at the ceiling here, just trying to think a little bit. Yeah, let's just look at the ceiling. And Rochelle, can we start with you? Do you have something in mind?
First, to talk to my 5-year-old self.
If you could take your face in your hands, what would you say to little Rochelle?
It's okay to share what's going on in your head. It's okay to talk about what you're feeling.
Awesome. Britt?
Yeah, actually, as you say that, I have this a little dorky. I'm my parents' first child, so when I was born, they had a sweater made of me. So as soon as you said that, I looked at the sweater. They recently gave it to me. And I'm thinking back to like this kid who was taller than she should have been, and always told to be quiet, or she wasn't like behaving like a proper kid. And I'm thinking, you are like, speak boldly. Your hair is epic. You're beautiful. And you are extremely intelligent. Yeah, that's what I would tell myself.
That's awesome. Thanks, Britt. Joy?
To my 5-year-old self, I would tell her to stand up for herself and for her people. You know, every single time someone said the N-word, don't say, oh no, it's okay. No, stand up for them because you know it's wrong. You know, stand up for what you believe in, and don't fear, you know, facing the challenges that you will face if you do stand out and stand up. You know, stand up for, you know, your brothers and sisters. You don't have to make yourself seem different or any better. It's not a fight between you and them. It's a time for you to stand together and to bind together and to, you know, truly act as a unit. And, you know, I tell her to love herself, you know, love your hair, love the music, love your language. You know, don't be afraid to speak it and to embrace it. And yeah.
Amazing. Amazing. Gracie?
I think I would say to be aware of these issues that exist but don't let those hinder your progress, and don't let those things discourage you. And I would also say don't silence yourself out of fear of being labeled. A lot of the time when I was younger, I was really scared that if I said something, I was like, oh, that was something racist that you said. People would be like, well, don't make everything about race, those kind of reactions. And so a lot of the times I just silenced myself, and I was just, my internal monologue just said oh, that's not right. But then we moved on. I never called it out vocally. So I would encourage myself to be more unapologetically vocal about it.
Unapologetically vocal. Beautiful. Shereen?
I was just thinking about it, and there's a show called The Kids Say the Darnest Things.
Yes.
And I think that filter, that no filter that kids have, I would tell myself, continue to be honest, continue to be that true to yourself, no matter what, to be able to speak and have a voice, because of the fact that what Brittany and some of you said, that you are beautiful, you're strong, who you are is enough. And so, I think I really resonate with this whole, kids say the darnest thing, then I'm going to say it. I'm going to be honest. I'm going to, you take me as I am. That's it.
Yeah.
I think I'll tell my 5-year-old self that.
Cool. Sueann?
Yeah, that was a hard question for me. I think I would say to my 5-year-old self, it's okay to take up space. And you don't need to make other people feel comfortable. It's okay to cry and be vulnerable, and to not be afraid to take chances and to put myself out there. Along with all those other things, I feel like if I had a chance to talk to my 5-year-old self, I'd have a full hour conversation. Give her a heads up, but those are some of the main points.
That's beautiful. So thank you so much, ladies, for really being super honest and vulnerable and sharing what probably nobody ever knew. Collectively, what has been muted. And so this evening, to close, I just want to say to each one of you, I see you. The advice is to speak your mind because you're beautiful. Your hair is epic. To stand up for yourself and your people. You are all intelligent. Do not fear to stand up and stand out. To love yourself, your music, and your language. To be aware of the issues that exist, but don't be discouraged by them. Do not silence yourself, but be unapologetically vocal. Be honest, be true, speak and have a voice, because each one of you are enough. And it's okay to take up space, to cry, and not to be afraid of taking chances. And so thank you for taking a chance this evening by sharing your hearts. And for everyone who is listening, thank you for being here. I hope that you share this conversation with your circle of friends and your circle of influence. And I know that this is not the last time we will be on here with these women. And so we're going to close. I'm going to ask these ladies to stay online just for a little bit longer, but if our tech support can please close the Facebook and the YouTube lives, please.
Bye.